have any questions, we'll try and answer them for you. I'd like you to stop by later. I'm sorry?
Several questions.
Okay.
On the flat panel system, how much buildup do you have on the inside of that system? Does, I mean, does all that overspray build up in there, or is the draft system pulling most of it out and it's not really building up?
A little bit of both. Go ahead.
With the downdraft system that we have, there's an opening, and the unit is at the booth. Feel free to stop by the booth. But there's an opening there that the fan is going to draw all that overspray down there. And the bulk of that overspray is going to be caught into that 5-gallon pail that's directly underneath that. And then surrounding that area, it's actually sitting on a filtration system, which is a standard Binks filter. So that can be replaced if needed. But the majority of the overspray actually goes right down in the machine. And on that control panel, but obviously it controls the line speed and it also controlled the fan speed. Anything else we need to add?
Oh, no, I would just add what Mark was touching on, excuse me, is for that kind of the cabinet, is over time it's going to naturally get overspray in there. It's all going to depend on how you have your gun set up. You might have a day where the gun was misaligned and it's going to spray sideways, but for the most part, it's going to try to catch as much as it can in that bucket. For the most part, yes.
We have some people in pre-finish that put some OSB around the edge, and it's just, it's just scrap and they throw it out after. Did you have another question?
Yeah, R value of 1 inch of this.
Yeah, so the R value is 6 to 7 R value on that, and what that does is that will not allow airflow through it. Will also keep water from going through there, so it's going to protect your floors, also your walls as well. And there's no ingredients in there that bees, termites, or anything. There's nothing in there for them. No nutritional value.
That thing is all pneumatic. You got electric in the trailers, or I heard you see a power motor in there. What part of it's electric as far as running?
Yeah. So there's a generator. Includes a generator. Includes an air compressor, which will run there's a Mr. Cool heating and air unit in there as well. And then that generator will run the lights, where the air compressor will also run the system.
What kind of temperature is required to spray that thing? Is it spray when it's 30 degrees outside?
Yeah, if you have the trailer, what's really good about the trailer is it does keep that inside temperature warm. Foam likes to be sprayed between 80 and 90 degrees. So if it's 30 outside and you have that trailer, I don't think you have anything to worry about. It stays warm in there. And what Jack and Jeff, our engineers there, what they've done to the trailer, they've taken all the walls off. I think they've added 1.5 inches extra, and then they sprayed closed cell foam inside the whole entire trailer, re-walled it, so it's really well insulated.
So if I had shits on the yard and it's 30 degrees outside, how does it affect the curing of the foam itself? You're spraying in the whole shed. Does it affect the actual curing of the foam with it being cold outside?
No, it doesn't. So usually if you have a substrate, let's say that's 30 to 40 degrees, what we train guys to do is to do a tack coat. So you do a real light coat, so as foam reacts, it throws off heat. So by doing that tack coat, you can kind of help warm the surface. You want to have it 40 degrees or higher. You're gonna lose yield. So you're gonna end up putting on more product. But as far as it reacting, it's still gonna cure out like it should.
We've already done substrates where the metal buildings where it was literally 0 degrees outside. So obviously that metal was 0 degrees. So we've done that, just what Jack was saying, that tack coat. You put a real thin coat of foam on there, and the exothermal reaction of the A and the B chemical warms that panel up extremely quickly. So now you went from 0 degrees to at least 50 degrees. And then you can go to the next one, do another tack coat, come back, and then you can put your full inch or 2 inches on that without any issues.
Would that trailer area also advise to, like, go out and spray, metal buildings for customers, say, a 40 by 50 shop? Or, you know, because we saw a lot of carports. People are asking us all the time for installation of carports.
Mhm.
And we talking to a lot of different, installation contractors around the time, they spray these things. It's a fortune. I don't know how much money you're making off of it, but, you know, customers seem to shy away from it because it costs so much. I don't know if this.
You mean, are you worried about the adhesion to the metal, or?
No, he's worried about how much yield per set.
How much product I can carry on there, it would be something that I can carry that product with 40 by 50 mil with 12-inch legs and, you know, doing single walls.
Well, a set of drum foam is going to go 6,000 square feet at 1 inch.
Massive expansion.
And you can keep 2 extra sets in the trailer and still be under your weight limit.
Yeah. Talk about the heated hose and blankets too, because you talked about 90 degrees.
To circle back to kind of the heat question, there's also a heated hose that comes with both the trailer as well as the cart. So there's heated drum blankets that stay around 90 degrees, as well as the heated hose, we bump it up. So that way, if it's laying across the cold ground, it kind of helps retain that heat, because the fluid temperature, as Justin said, likes to be around 90 degrees, 90 to 100.
And there have been issues where if you can't get the drum stock up to 90 degrees, say you turn it on in the morning and it was 70, and you have to spray that building at 10 and it's just not 90, it's 80, you can adjust the hose temperature. You can turn the hose up to even 120 so that you know that you're going to have that warmer foam coming through there. The hoses are 75 feet, so you're running foam at 75 feet, which is going to heat up from that 80 degree.
How much is that system in the trailer? If I were to outboard a system like that. I'll go see.
Yeah, so stop by. There's literally a trailer in the booth. Please come up. We have all kinds of.
I don't really look at too much of it.
But the trailer itself right now, with one, either the foam or the polyurethane, is 44 or 5.
Liz, did you have a question?
Yes, I was asking about, wanted to ask about R value too. Does multi-layering increase the R value?
Yes, every inch is 6.2. So if you do 2 inches, you just double it. And so when we say board feet, it's the same thing. So a set does 6,000 board feet. So if you're accustomed to 2 inches, just cut that in half. Or 3 inches, it would be 2,000 square feet.
If you're,
Well, no,
like
it's
a lot of
if you did
cabin
3 inches.
manufacturers in Oregon, let's say they need 49 R value, what they do is they put down a base of our closed cell phone, and then they'll put that over top of that, to get you up in the ceiling to get the real thickness. Because
What about, does that, you know, we're always concerned about insulation against a metal roof without passing. So I guess, does that create any issues, or is that solving the issue?
So it all depends on how they call it the building envelope. They call it the building envelope of your building. So if you have like up north, we have crawl space, or in our attics, typically the floor of the attic is insulated. So you wouldn't want to spray foam the roof deck of that, because now you've just isolated an unconditioned space. So if you have unvented soffit or an unvented building, you can spray the roof decking without issue, as long as there's some sort of conditioning happening there. Or if it's not going to be, or if you're not introducing a lot of moisture into the building. Like if it's going to be an occupied space, you would want some way of pulling that moisture out of the building. Or if there was, let's say, a propane furnace, something that's introducing moisture into the building, you need some way for that moisture to get out. So that's the idea behind vented soffit with like a ridge cap. But if you were going to build a building and you were going to leave the floor of the attic uninsulated, You could then insulate the roof decking, have a sealed soffit, have your sealed roof, and it would condition the entire space. I don't know if that helps answer.
Referring to an attic.
Well, I'm saying attic, but roof decking. So for your metal roof, it would all depend on how your soffit is. If it's sealed, then yes, you could spray your roof decking with it without issue. Or your metal, I'll call it.
What's required, what's procedures of cleanup, what's required of taking care of maintaining that system of storage? The HVLP for foam?
No, you can just leave. So I think Justin touched on it. So the idea behind spray foam is you have your A and your B, and when it gets to the gun, it goes through a disposable tip, and that's the only mixing that occurs. So when you're done, you leave that dirty tip in there, and everything else has stayed separate. So you can just push it off to the side and wait till the next time you use it, put in a new tip, and you're ready to go. For prolonged storage, let's say you were just getting started and you weren't going to use it, if you weren't going to use it within 2 weeks, is just turn the system on, spray the foam for maybe 10 to 15 seconds to keep it moving through the lines. Because the A side of the two-part product is the hardener of the two. If it sits in the line long enough, it'll start to crystallize, and then you run the risk of getting blockages and things. So that's why we say if you're not going to use it it's going to sit for longer than 2 weeks, to just turn it on and spray it just to keep fluid moving through the lines.
Does the tips, are they you can't clean those up and reuse them, or?
No, you can't. They're disposable tips.
When you store
Yes.
it,
Mhm.
when you're storing food in this machine, you have to keep it at the 80 to 90 to 100 degrees. How do you store it?
So you could store it just above freezing. Now I will say, because it relies on the drum blankets to heat the fluid up, if you were going to use it the next day, you would want to plug it in so it would have time to warm up, because heating up 55 gallons of material takes some time. But if you weren't going to use it for those 2 weeks, by all means, as long as it's not freezing, you're fine to just unplug it and push it off to the side.
We see a lot of builders that just have the HVLP unit, but they use it every other day. They'll build a hot box within their plant, insulated, have a little heater just for that unit, push it in there. It's 75 feet of hose.
Mhm.
So.
The multicolored paint wall mount system, you said that you don't have to worry about cleanup or flushing the lines very often. How long can paint sit in those lines before it needs to be addressed? If it does sit, say, out there for too long, what's the process in cleaning it out where you don't get any gunk or overspray or like clogging?
Oh, hi.
Where it's gonna make the paint quality decrease?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, kind of. I sort of kind of hear you, but in the multicolor systems, I actually, the worst case scenario is we tore an old system out, Mark and I, and that system hadn't been used in probably over a year, and the paint was still wet inside the lines. Now, just like a water hose or a water line in your house, if you don't use something, if it's nothing moving, then how it builds up, it will eventually do that. It'll narrow that paint hose down a little bit, but that's pretty severe. That would almost be like if you abandoned the shop for a while and came back to a year later and wanted to run it. Like I said, we tore old pumps out that the paint was still wet in there. As far as degrading the quality of the paint, I don't think so. Because you're not introducing air in there. Obviously, it's not a vacuum or anything, but if you're not introducing an active air source into there, that paint will last in there a long time. I've never seen that be an issue, to be honest with you.
The standard answer, though, is they leave it in all year. That's what we see around. Now, urethanes, because they dry hard and fast, we don't encourage that. So, yes, sir.
Secondary question, that system, is it primarily fed through buckets or drums of paint?
Whether it's drums or buckets,
Yeah,
It
what's the
feeds from
primary
both.
method of running those types of multicolored systems?
yeah,
Both.
you can use drums, or we basically build a system for your shop, knowing if you're using drums or pails or whatever, and it's easily adjusted for drums or pails if you wanted to go to, drums of colors that you use most often. You could do that very easily with just a few tweaks and the immersion hose and that type of thing on how to get paint into the pump. You can do that very easily whether you're using pails or drums.
The operating pressure for the air system that supplies the propellant, you'd have it regulated down, or how's it work?
Yeah, the system has a regulator on it. We like to see those pumps run at about 80 psi, somewhere between 70 and 80. You want to get, if you get any lower than that, those pumps will tend to stall in either the up or the downstroke. So we say maybe 80 pounds. These are the pumps that we use are 30-to-1 ratio. So if you're putting 80 pounds into that motor, you're getting 2,400 psi of fluid pressure out of there at 80 pounds, which is more than enough to atomize any of these latex coatings. The latex coating that we're using, you probably have to have about 1,800 psi to atomize it, between 18 and 2,000. So you have plenty of room in there. So really, you have to have a compressor that's able to supply 80 pounds of air pressure, 80 pounds of psi to the pump. Anyone else?
Did we solve all the problems of the world?
Most of them.
Oh, there's one.
Does humidity affect the ability to spray foam?
It does to a degree. I mean, if it's a humid day, you're going to go through more tips is probably the biggest indicator of what you'll see on a humid day is that your tips are going to be changing out, and it's all going to come down to well, I'll back up. The other issue would be on a substrate. So if you had a metal building you were going to spray on a humid day and there was enough humidity that you could wipe it off, you're not going to get good adhesion. And what you'll run the risk of is kind of developing a pocket in there. So rather than it'll still spray foam and it'll look fine, but because it won't have that adhesion, you run the risk of moisture getting back there.
Is there concern, somebody put a separation element like house wrap or something underneath that metal and they're going to spray foam? Is that a better application versus trying to spray the back of that metal, which if you're at a place panel, what are you going to do?
So I would actually encourage you to spray right to the metal because, again, if you have a house wrap that you're going to spray, you're not getting that tight adhesion, or I'm sorry, that tight insulation. You're just kind of creating a pocket in between the two. So like on a metal building, I know a lot of times what guys will do is they'll cut that house wrap off and then spray directly on the metal.
Does that give that metal a little bit more impact resistance, I guess, too, by having that on there?
It does. Like the guy said, we have one of the trailers at the booth, and if you've ever seen an enclosed trailer and hit the side of it, it sounds like a tin can. Whereas if you hit ours, it sounds like a concrete, or it feels like a brick wall. Because we spray foam the inside of the trailer to 3 inches. So yeah, it adds quite a bit of strength to whatever you're spraying.
Closed cell, even at 1 inch on the interior of a building, really increases the rigidity of that structure as well.
I had a little experience down in Florida, in Tallahassee with a builder down there. Did all metal buildings. And one of the things we were talking about earlier about, the metal being cold, and they were talking about putting a tack coat on. And that really helped. When I was in Tallahassee, it was January, and it gets cold in Tallahassee. And there was probably 50 degrees later on in the day, but early morning, that metal was really cold. So we put a tack coat on it, and you could feel the heat coming off of that building. So that was like the way to go with that. So we sprayed that, but when he picked that building up, and he wasn't familiar, the builder wasn't familiar with foam, or they had never foamed a metal building before. And he told me when he picked that building up, he could tell just from picking the building up how rigid it had become because of the insulation in there. Not rigid enough that it was, damaging or anything, but at the same time, he said that building to him, it gained strength. He could tell the difference just by picking the building up. So it does, just like Mark said, it just creates that strength of that building. It didn't wobble, didn't have that metal sound or that type of thing, and he was impressed with that. So. I'm sorry, what was that?
Do we need to add for the paint system?
Yeah, you have to have agitator, along for storage.
For drums? What typically the customers that buy drums for us, they buy it in drums for their high moving items, so no, but a lot of the shops do it anyway. You know, particularly our white, pretty heavy. We design our coatings to be high build. We do a lot of two-story buildings and the painters wanna go around the building wet on wet and really build up a lot of millage. So some of the coatings like white are really thick, so yeah, we have little air mixers that they put on there. And then the slower moving colors or specialty colors, they supply costs. Anybody have any other questions? Yes, sir.
Does humidity affect the curing of the foam? Sometimes we make it where it would cure thicker, or we want to expand more before it actually would dry. It seems like it's tough. Foam, it always seems to be, it's slow. It'll expand to a point and it kind of stops. But if it's slow curing, it seems like it may expand a little more.
So if it's cold outside, it'll take longer to develop hardness as well as you run the risk of losing yield. Because it needs that heat to kind of throw off and it do its full expansion, if you're spraying a colder area, it's going to take longer to reach that temperature, therefore losing some yield. As far as humidity, it doesn't impact it.
So it doesn't expand more if it cures slow.
It does not, no.
Does that affect metal paint, does that affect any paint warranties on metal or corrosion or anything prematurely maybe going to take place?
As far as with spray foam? I don't believe so, no. We could do some digging on it, but I know from talking to spray foam manufacturers, there was a big movement for shingle guys for a long time. They said you can't spray directly on the roof decking because it's going to void our warranty. And I know this is getting into residential, and they said it for, I think, from like the 1990s to the 2000s. And it was because they had such a good relationship with bad insulation guys. And then they came out and said, well, you can spray the roof decking. It's not an issue. So we could do some digging just to be sure, but as far as I know, it doesn't.